Homeless kid asks Sandra Bullock for $1. Keanu Reeves watches and her response shocks everyone. It was a crisp evening in Los Angeles, the city buzzing with its usual energy. Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, longtime friends and co-stars, had just finished dinner at a quiet restaurant. They strolled down the street, enjoying a rare, peaceful moment away from flashing cameras and movie sets. As they walked past a small alley, a young homeless boy, no older than 10, stepped forward hesitantly. His clothes were worn, his hair messy, and his big brown eyes filled with a mix of hope and shyness. He clutched an old backpack and took a deep breath before looking up at Sandra. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I have $1? Just $1? Keanu stopped, watching silently, while Sandra knelt down to meet the boy at eye level. Instead of immediately reaching for her wallet, she smiled gently. $1? Why just one?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated. "I just need something to eat. I don't want to ask for too much." Sandra's eyes softened. She reached into her purse and pulled out not one but a crisp $100 bill. The boy's eyes widened in shock. Keanu raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How about we make a deal?" Sandra said warmly. "Take this, but promise me something." The boy nodded eagerly. "Anything. Promise me that one day when you're able to, you'll help someone else who needs it." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes as he clutched the bill tightly. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I promise." Keanu, who had been watching the exchange silently, suddenly stepped forward. "And dinner's on me," he said, motioning toward a small diner across the street. The boy's face lit up with joy. Sandra and Keanu walked with him to the diner, sharing laughs and stories as they enjoyed a meal together. People nearby, having witnessed the moment, smiled warmly. For one little boy, it wasn't just about the money. It was about kindness, hope, and the promise that someday he could pay it forward. And besides Sandra, Keanu Reeves and everyone who saw the act of kindness, he was very, very happy. What do you think? Homeless kid asks Sandra Bullock for $1. Keanu Reeves watches and her response shocks everyone. It was a crisp evening in Los Angeles, the city buzzing with its usual energy. Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, longtime friends and co-stars, had just finished dinner at a quiet restaurant. They strolled down the street, enjoying a rare, peaceful moment away from flashing cameras and movie sets. As they walked past a small alley, a young homeless boy, no older than 10, stepped forward hesitantly. His clothes were worn, his hair messy, and his big brown eyes filled with a mix of hope and shyness. He clutched an old backpack and took a deep breath before looking up at Sandra. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I have $1? Just $1? Keanu stopped, watching silently, while Sandra knelt down to meet the boy at eye level. Instead of immediately reaching for her wallet, she smiled gently. $1? Why just one? She asked softly. The boy hesitated. "I just need something to eat. I don't want to ask for too much." Sandra's eyes softened. She reached into her purse and pulled out not one but a crisp $100 bill. The boy's eyes widened in shock. Keanu raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How about we make a deal?" Sandra said warmly. "Take this, but promise me something." The boy nodded eagerly. "Anything. Promise me that one day when you're able to, you'll help someone else who needs it." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes as he clutched the bill tightly. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I promise." Keanu, who had been watching the exchange silently, suddenly stepped forward. "And dinner's on me," he said, motioning toward a small diner across the street. A meal, a story, and a new beginning. As they walked into the warm diner, the smell of fresh pancakes and grilled cheese filled the air. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, approached with a smile. "What can I get you all tonight?" The boy hesitated, looking down at the menu as if afraid to ask for too much. Sandra nudged him playfully. "Get whatever you want, sweetheart." His face lit up. "Really? Can I have a burger and fries? And maybe a milkshake?" Keanu chuckled. "Make it 2 milkshakes." As they ate, the boy, who introduced himself as Danny, began to open up. He told them how he had been living on the streets for nearly a year after his mother passed away. His father had left long before that, and with no other family, he had nowhere to go. "I try to stay at the shelter sometimes, but it's always full, so I just sleep wherever I can." Sandra blinked back tears while Keanu looked away for a moment, swallowing hard. "Do you go to school?" Sandra asked gently. Danny shook his head. "I used to, but it's hard when you don't have a place to stay. I try to read books at the library, though. I like stories." Keanu smiled. "Books are great. They take you places even when you can't go anywhere." Danny nodded excitedly. "Yeah, my favorite is The Little Prince. It makes me feel like I can still dream." Sandra and Keanu exchanged a glance. This kid was something special. A life-changing offer. By the time they finished their meal, the diner was nearly empty. Sandra and Keanu knew they couldn't just leave Danny out in the cold again. Sandra hesitated before speaking. "Danny, what if we help you? Not just tonight, but for real." Danny's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Keanu leaned forward. "We know some good people. We can get you into a safe place, help you go back to school, and make sure you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from." Danny looked at them, his little hands trembling. "Really? But why would you do that for me?" Sandra smiled. "Because once someone helped me when I needed it, and now I want to do the same for you." Tears rolled down Danny's cheeks. He had spent so long being invisible, so long believing no one cared. But here they were, two of the biggest stars in the world, treating him like he mattered. Keanu patted his shoulder. "You're not alone, kid, and you never have to be again." Danny nodded, unable to speak, but his eyes said everything. A future full of hope. That night, with the help of Sandra and Keanu's connections, Danny was placed in a safe home. Over the next few years, they kept in touch, visiting him, helping him get an education, and making sure he always had what he needed. Years later, when Danny grew up, he kept the promise he made to Sandra that night. He became a social worker, dedicating his life to helping homeless children, because he knew exactly what it felt like to be one. And on his desk, framed in glass, sat an old, worn-out $100 bill, a reminder of the night a stranger's kindness changed his life forever. The end. What do you think? Years later, Danny pays it forward. Years passed, and Danny's life transformed completely. With the help of Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, he had received a stable home, a good education, and most importantly, a second chance at life. Sandra and Keanu had kept in touch, checking in on him as he grew older. They saw him graduate high school, then college, and eventually take a job helping kids who were in the same situation he had once been in. Now in his late 20s, Danny worked as a social worker in Los Angeles, helping homeless children find safe places to stay. He had dedicated his life to paying forward the kindness he once received. One evening, as he walked through the same streets where he had once begged for a single dollar, Danny noticed a young girl sitting alone on a bench, hugging her knees. Her clothes were ragged, her hair messy, and her eyes filled with sadness, just like his had been all those years ago. A full circle moment. Danny approached her gently. "Hey there," he said with a warm smile. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, startled. "I'm fine," she mumbled, trying to hide her face. Danny recognized the fear, the same fear he had when he was in her place. "You know, when I was your age, I used to sit on this very same bench," he said softly. "And I thought no one cared about me. But someone did, and they helped me. Maybe I can help you too." The girl hesitated, then looked up. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me," Danny smiled. "Because once, a kind woman and a man with a big heart helped me when I thought no one would." He reached into his wallet and pulled out something, a single, worn-out $100 bill. The same one Sandra had given him years ago, now framed and protected. He showed it to her. "This is a promise that kindness can change lives. Someone gave this to me, and it saved me. And now I want you to have this." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She took the bill with trembling fingers. I don't know what to say." Danny knelt down and smiled. "Just promise me one thing. When you're able, help someone else. Keep this cycle of kindness going." The girl nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. A reunion of fate. That weekend, Danny had dinner with Sandra and Keanu at their favorite little diner, the same one where they had taken him all those years ago. As they ate, Danny shared the story of the little girl. Sandra's eyes filled with pride. "You did exactly what I hoped you would do that night." Keanu chuckled. Looks like we made a good investment in you, kid. Danny grinned. You both did more than that. You gave me a life, and now I get to do the same for others. Sandra reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That's what real kindness does. It keeps going, long after we're gone. As they laughed and reminisced, the three of them knew one thing for sure. One small act of kindness had created a ripple effect that would never end. The real end, or just the beginning. And so the boy who once begged for a single dollar became the man who gave hope to others. Somewhere out there, another life would be changed because of that promise. Because kindness never stops, it only grows. This brings the story full circle. What do you think? Did it end the way you hoped? The legacy of kindness lives on. Years passed, and Danny's mission to help others only grew stronger. He started a foundation called the Promise Project, dedicated to helping homeless children find food, shelter, and education, just like he once needed. His story gained attention, and soon people from all over Los Angeles and even beyond came forward to support his cause. Schools, charities, and even local businesses joined him in his mission. One day, as Danny prepared for a fundraising event, he received a phone call. It was Sandra Bullock. "Danny, we have a surprise for you," she said, her voice filled with excitement. That evening, when Danny arrived at the charity gala, he was shocked to see Keanu Reeves standing beside Sandra on stage. The audience erupted in applause as Sandra took the microphone. A surprise that changes everything. "Everyone, meet Danny Carter," Sandra announced proudly. Years ago, this young man was just a boy on the streets asking for $1. Today, he has helped hundreds of children find hope. And tonight, we're going to help him do even more. Keanu stepped forward with a grin. "Danny, buddy, we know you've been working hard, but every hero needs a little help." A large screen behind them lit up with the donation total for the Promise Project. Danny's heart nearly stopped. 5 million donated. The room erupted in cheers. Sandra and Keanu had used their influence to bring together Hollywood's biggest names, actors, musicians, and philanthropists, to donate toward Danny's mission. Tears welled up in Danny's eyes as Sandra hugged him. "You kept your promise, Danny, and now we're keeping ours." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is just the beginning, my friend. A future filled with hope." With the new funding, the Promise Project expanded nationwide. More shelters, more food, more education, more hope. Danny continued to visit schools and shelters, sharing his story with children who thought they had no future. And in his office, framed next to his awards and achievements, hung a worn-out $100 bill, a reminder of the day his life changed forever. One day, a little boy approached him, much like he had once approached Sandra. "Mister, can I have $1?" Danny smiled, knelt down, and said the words that started it all. "How about we make a deal?" And so the legacy of kindness continued. The end, or just the beginning. This story's come full circle. What do you think? Should I add anything else? A new chapter begins. Years passed, and the Promise Project grew into a national movement. Danny Carter's name became synonymous with hope, and his mission touched thousands of lives. The once homeless boy was now a man who gave others a second chance, just as Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves had given him. One day, as Danny prepared for a speech at a major event, he received an unexpected phone call. "Danny, it's Sandra. Keanu and I have something important to tell you. Can we meet?" Curious and slightly nervous, Danny agreed. They arranged to meet at the same little diner where their journey had begun all those years ago. A life-changing offer. When Danny arrived, Sandra and Keanu were already waiting for him. They greeted him warmly, just as they always had. Sandra took a deep breath. "Danny, we've been watching everything you've done, and we couldn't be prouder. But we think it's time for something bigger." Danny raised an eyebrow. "Bigger? The Promise Project is already doing great things." Keanu smiled. "It is, but imagine this. What if we take it global?" Danny blinked. "Global?" Sandra nodded. "Keanu and I have been working behind the scenes. With the connections we have, we can take the Promise Project beyond the U.S. There are kids all over the world who need hope, just like you once did." Danny felt his heart race, expanding to other countries, reaching children in places where poverty and homelessness were even worse. It was a dream he had never dared to imagine. Keanu leaned forward. "This isn't just a charity anymore, Danny. This is a movement, and we want you to lead it." Danny sat in stunned silence. He had gone from a lost child on the streets to being asked to lead a worldwide mission. Finally, he exhaled and smiled. "Let's do it." Sandra and Keanu beamed. The next chapter of their journey had just begun. Changing the world, one child at a time. Over the next few years, the Promise Project expanded globally. Schools were built, shelters were opened, and thousands of children found new opportunities. Danny traveled to different countries, meeting kids who had the same look of hopelessness in their eyes that he once had. And just like Sandra had done for him, he offered them more than just money. He offered them hope, dignity, and a future. One evening, as Danny stood on a stage in front of thousands of supporters, he pulled something out of his pocket. A worn-out $100 bill. The same one Sandra had given him all those years ago. Holding it up, he smiled. "This isn't just money. This is proof that one act of kindness can change a life, and that life can change the world." The crowd erupted into applause. Sandra and Keanu, standing in the front row, wiped tears from their eyes. Their small act of kindness had come full circle, and had created something greater than any of them could have ever imagined. And so, the legacy lives on. Somewhere in the world, another homeless child sat alone, feeling invisible. But thanks to Danny, Sandra, and Keanu, they wouldn't be invisible for long. Because kindness never dies, it only grows. The end, and a new beginning. This brings the story to a powerful conclusion. How do you feel about it? Would you like any changes or additions?